I don't know about y'all, but when I finished Dungeon Crawler Carl in 2024, I needed more. I feel like this happened with a lot of people, but Dungeon Crawler Carl opened up a whole new genre for me. Before reading DCC, I had no idea that lit RPG as a genre even existed. And as someone who loves video games and literature, it was literally like God descended from the heavens and presented me with the best genre for my hobbies. Now, with that being said, I finished Dungeon Crawler Carl and I was scratching at the bit. I needed more in that genre. I just really had no idea where to start because little did I know that lit RPG has been around for a little bit and there is a lot of material. A lot of that material is self-published. A lot of it is on Royal Road. So I started going to Reddit. I started trying to seek advice on what I should read next. So if you have the same conundrum, or if you're just looking for some lit RPG recommendations, I have a few for you. Now, I do want to preface that if I had a tier list, Dungeon Crawler Carl would be S tier for me. I think it is so funny. It's so witty. I never really have books make me laugh out loud. A lot of the time, they just sort of make me cringe. And a lot of lit RPG tries to introduce humor into their writing, which can be a huge hindrance for me. Because if you're trying to be funny, and it just doesn't land with me, it kind of makes me pull back a little bit. I get a little hesitant. So with that being said, these are the books that I read trying to seek fulfillment after reading Dungeon Crawler Carl. And I'm going to tell you what hits and what didn't hit for me. So first we have Jake's Magical Market. The premise of this story is that Jake is running a convenience store whenever the world ends. And essentially, these beings come and start competing on Jake's world, competing for resources, competing for cards, because this world also has a card system. Eye of the Bedlam Bride by Dungeon Crawler Carl, or in the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, was one of my favorites because I love a card-based system. Greed Island from Hunter x Hunter, my favorite anime arc of all time. I love a card-based system. So I was enthralled with this story. And the first half of this story was incredible. Jake is getting cards, he's getting stronger. But then the second half of the story takes a completely different turn. And that's another thing with lit RPGs is sometimes they are so long. So it becomes such a commitment to get into one and to read one, and then to get halfway through an almost 800-page book and realize that you don't really like it anymore. It's really disappointing, and that's what happened to me with Jake's Magical Market, is the second half of the book basically turns into an isekai, and he gets transported to another world, and the story completely changes. So that's something you have to keep in mind whenever you're getting into this book. However, the premise was really good and it was really interesting. I am interested to read the second one. I'm not jumping into it right away because of where I stood with the second half of the first book, but it's still something that I'm interested in reading more about. Next up on the docket, we have Bog Standard Isekai. And Mark gets isekai'd into a children's body. And it has to navigate this new world, this magic system, and all of these new people while also trying to become stronger and battling with the fact that he's about 15 years younger than he was in his past life. I really enjoyed Bog Standard Isekai. I've read both Scarred and Illusionist, and I think that Miles English does a very good job at portraying Mark in this younger person's body and Mark having to grapple with that fact. For example, there's other like 12-year-old girls that are interested in him and want to be romantically interested in him, but Mark is like, oh, I don't really know about that because I'm actually 25. I can't remember his exact age, but I'm actually 25 or 30, and that's weird. I really appreciated that. Mark makes some really close friends. He has a mentor. There's a lot of slice of life in this, and I really like a slice of life story. And sometimes the stakes do feel very high. I also find the progression system really interesting. Basically, these kids, they don't get a class until, I don't know, age 13, I think. Sorry if I'm getting these ages wrong, but around 13, all the skills that they've built up to that point and also their mental capabilities help determine what their class is going to be. And then within that, there's a progression system with those classes. And there's also prejudice with those classes and how people in this society interact with people of certain classes. And of course, also the element of, should I hide my class? Do I want people to know what my class is? This has been one of my favorite lit RPGs that I've read since Dungeon Crawler Carl, and I cannot recommend it enough. I really enjoyed it. By far, my favorite lit RPG that I've read after Dungeon Crawler Carl has been the game at Carousel. This story feels so unique. It's a horror lit RPG where a group of friends enter this town called Carousel and are given horror archetypes. So you have the final girl, the movie buff, the jock, and all your normal standard horror archetypes. They are made to act out horror movies from beginning to end, going from the first act to the final act. And if even one person makes it out of that storyline alive, then they all survive. So throughout a storyline, multiple people are going to die because it's a horror movie. But if your final person makes it out alive, then you're guaranteed to survive and move on to the next storyline. I love a lit RPG that has layers. So when there is a story happening above the main story, oh, I love it so much. And the game at Carousel does that really well. There's only 3 out right now. There's more chapters out on Royal Road as Rob M. Lastral posts them. I've been waiting for them to come out in a collection just because I prefer to read them that way. So I'm waiting for the 4th one to release. But the 3rd one left on such a good cliffhanger. I cannot wait to read the 4th one. The next book is Beware of Chicken by Casual Farmer. This is a cultivation story, so if that's not your jam, then you might not enjoy this. However, I didn't think that I liked cultivation stories either, but I feel like this takes a very interesting twist and creates really funny elements. A man named Jin gets isekai'd into another world and into someone's body who wanted to become a very strong cultivator, which is essentially someone who has really strong spiritual power, but all Jin wants to be is a farmer. He doesn't want to be a cultivator. He's always wanted to live a quiet life, but he's now in this body that harbors all of this power, and he doesn't really know what to do with it. So he uses that chi and applies it to his farming. He ends up getting this rooster, hence the chicken. And this rooster, you end up eventually hearing its inner monologue. This rooster is very intelligent, and it has the mind of how you would think a typical cultivator would have. It wants power, it wants to protect Jin, it wants to protect its farm. So it's really funny to see the dichotomy of someone who is in the body of a very strong cultivator and someone who has the capabilities of being a very strong cultivator, and then having this chicken who has a body that isn't able to be a strong cultivator, but his inner self wants to be the strongest cultivator. So this is another fun slice of life, low stakes story. And I've read the first one. I haven't read the second one yet, and I probably will. But again, it's pretty long. The second one at least is pretty long. So it's a little bit of a time commitment, but it is enjoyable enough for me to want to keep going with the story. So there are a few others here that I haven't really mentioned, But I wanted to highlight some of my favorites that I've read so far and ones that I think could appeal to the Dungeon Crawler Carl audience, especially if you don't know where to go next in your lit RPG journey. I'm still reading more lit RPGs. I would love recommendations if you have some recommendations for me. And I just love talking about lit RPG. I think it's such a fun genre. So if you enjoyed this video, please let me know. And if you want to hear more recommendations, I'd love to talk more about it. But that's all I have. And thanks for watching. I just heard my Microsoft Teams go off.